I think everyone's here with the exception of Mr. Kadir. So I didn't see him registering for it. So I'm not sure if he will be joining us. We do have a guest, David Lorenzo from Councilmember Glass's office.
Good evening, everyone. Just listening in. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us. Dile, our chair, temporary interim chair, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So just to kind of fill in, welcome everybody. Our meeting is started. This is our second meeting, and I'm so glad that we have majority of our members here. I have messaged Mr. Kadir as well, so I'm hoping he's probably just running late and is able to join us. So one of the things we left off of the agenda last time was, because we didn't have enough people, was voting for the chair. So here we are. That's the first thing that Bertha needs from us, that we pick a chair, and we kind of go from there.
I think you've been doing a good job, so I vote for continue as the chair.
So because life is so busy, maybe we can have, I saw some of the other committees doing the same, task force cohorts doing the same thing. Maybe we could have a co-chair. So anybody else?
Well, we'll have since Ilham as co-chair.
I'd be happy to be a co-chair.
Okay.
Unless, somebody else wants to do it. I'm just saying, if nobody else wants to do it, I'd be happy to be the co-chair.
Green.
I'm happy with you being the co-chair, Ilhan. I am fine with that. If that's something that you're not up for, I'm happy to step in. Either one works, as long as we have coverage. I think that because life is so busy and it's the summer, and unexpected things happen, as I have experienced personally, co-chair I think makes total sense.
Yeah, because that way things can continue. I know that I'm going to be traveling in September as well. So I'll be available. However, we need to have continuity so that things can keep moving along, because our turn comes up so quickly, and November is just.
And I was traveling, so I'm back now. So I'm more available. So yeah, I'm available.
Okay. How do we do this? Do we vote? Do we object? Are we okay?
I think we have to follow. I think we have to follow Robert's Rules of Order because of the nature of the committee. So I nominate Dia as chair and Ilhan as co-chair.
I second.
Okay.
So we can have a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody who opposes? No opposition.
Okay. So the record can show that that process was done.
Okay, thank you. He is not able to, Mr. Kadir is not able to join today. He's tackling some other deadlines. So he will check in with us later. In terms of just going with our discussion last time. So our last time we really focused on brainstorming. I'm not sure if Ilhan, you or Ambreen had a chance to take a
I watched the video.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So we kind of brainstormed major ideas, but it was more of today was where do we go from here and coming up with sessions. I did share some of the interfaith events that I knew that were upcoming. I know Bertha was researching some as well, but I haven't seen any come through K-Chance or others.
There's another one happening, the Unity Walk on September 10th. I'm on the board of the Interfaith Conference, and I have an email I can forward to each of you to share. It's an opportunity to register. It's part of an annual tradition around September 11th weekend anniversary, specifically the history, for those who remember it, back when it first started, was an opportunity to demonstrate solidarity with people of faith to confront the rise of hate crimes that were happening in the wake of 9/11, and also to affirm the values that bring together the faith communities that make up the metropolitan region. So I'm happy to share that, Bertha. I don't know if that is something that was on your radar. I hope it was. I hope it was on your radar. So Simi
this
would be
the
very
same
happy
one
to
that-
know.
Is in DC, or is it a different one?
It's in DC, but it's regional participation. So Loudoun County, folks from Hyattsville and Prince George's. So it's in DC, but it is a multi-state regional effort.
Okay, there was one that Kate Chance had shared in her faith community newsletter. So that's the one I had emailed the team with. That's also in DC. I forgot the route, but it ends at the DC mosque. So they go through a bunch of different congregations and end up at the DC mosque. But if there's multiple events happening around that same time frame, that would be great. We can always get that information to Kate so that she can send it out to other.
It may be that Kate, I know Kate is on the list for getting it. So it could be that it's the same event. I didn't see the newsletter. I think that may have come out when I was dealing with personal family issues. So I may have missed that.
Adela, which mosque does it end at? On the one on Massachusetts Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah, are we including the mosque on P Street at all in any of our concerns or anything? I mean, you know which one I'm talking?
So this is, like Ambreen was mentioning, this is not an event through us. It's just an event that's happening. It's coordinated. It has a team, but we're just proposing.
Ilhan, if you have suggestions on adding to that route, that I can connect you to the coordinator, Simi.
That would be really good.
I'll follow up from this email and communicate with you and her, connecting you, because the registration's begun, but I know that they have an interest in engaging as many faith communities as possible.
I didn't know that I had a mosque in P Street. Which mosque is this?
It's called Masjid Muhammad, and it's basically an African-American mosque.
Not in P Street, that's in New Jersey Avenue. New Jersey and Q Street.
4th and P, I thought. Is that not?
4th and New Jersey.
Okay, Masjid Muhammad, right? With brother.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
When
I drive, I go down P to get to it. So maybe that's why I keep thinking of it.
Is that the Nation's Mosque? Did they also go by the Nation's Mosque? Is that the same one you're thinking of?
It used to be the Nation's
Mosque.
It was set up. Yeah, it was set up by the Nation.
Yeah, they're connected. They're connected. Imam Sharif is part of the board. So I don't know. They're very much connected. I don't know if the mosque is part of the route this year, but they're very much involved.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Bertha. I noticed you added some stuff in the chat.
Yep.
So the second one is the flyer for that second item?
Yes. And then the third one I'm about to drop into our chat right now as well with more information. And I think the first one is the one that you've been sharing with the group.
Yes, that's very local to Montgomery County.
Yep.
So it's here.
And this is the Unity Walk. I am only
item number 2, I think, is the storytelling initiative, Bertha. Isn't that the multi-faith storytelling evening?
But that's also part of the Unity Walk.
Yeah. There are a couple of, and there are going to be more events that are added, I understand, that are being coordinated by different communities. So as soon as I get them, I'm happy to share.
Bertha, did you find out if there's more interfaith events happening in Montgomery County? Are you aware of any?
So I checked these 3 with Kate, who the one that shared the details. I also emailed, like I had mentioned, the schedulers for council members, and nothing more specific to Montgomery County. I did not get any more feedback. Kate did mention that there's likely going to be a lot more scheduled in the coming, days, weeks. So we'll definitely be on the lookout.
So I did attend the meeting.
We've been participating in this interfaith walk for about our 6th year at the Germantown complex with the Prince of Peace organization and the synagogue in Germantown and Israel. We've been doing this, our 11th or 12th year we've been doing it. So I don't know how Kate doesn't know anything about this.
No, she
That's
does.
surprising.
She does. It's the first thing she mentioned.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
The September 4th one, right? The one on Boyd's,
Yes,
Maryland? Is that-
September, yeah.
Yes.
Labor Day weekend, yeah.
So I did attend a meeting for, what is it? Not the hate task force, but the Committee on Hate and Violence. And they are planning to put together events in the fall. So they were in planning stages of some of those events. So that's maybe what Kate was referring to in terms of more upcoming events.
Adela, is that the one that is being organized through Montgomery County? Lisa is the chair of that?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, okay, just so, yeah, all right, great.
Yeah. So one of the things I did was, and again, Ambreen, you might have missed it, and I know Ilhan was not back, was I did send an email to our cohort with anything that I see in upcoming. So
Yeah.
of course, there are other cohorts that are meeting as well. So those are on our webpage, the task force webpage, but then the information for this other I keep forgetting their name, Community on Hate. The information is not on a website. So I have to ping Kate again and again to get that information. So as soon as I got that information, I shared it with our team, and I'll probably do the same thing for the next meeting as well. I think people should know what others are doing in Montgomery County to kind of help us out.
Yeah, and on that note, I've gotten questions from different faith leaders that I've talked to who are not in the Muslim community, but I've met in other contexts when I've been working on other shows and such. And I've had a lot of questions, actually, to the point that someone else just raised, which is in Montgomery County, aside from kind of fundraisers and events, is there a kind of a public calendar of a cross section of activities that people could participate in, whether it's related to social community services around food distribution, or raising awareness around needs of new arrivals and migrants. There are lots of different activities, but one of the things that I've heard as a feedback, as I have shared, hey, I'm on this commission, we're trying to better understand why, what are some of the points that are made. And what I've heard in the last, not 2 weeks, but last 4 weeks, is this point that communication about regular updates about what's happening in a variety of places, including social media, is just, it's not as well known. And that was something that I just wanted to make sure that I reflect and share in this conversation as we think about recommendations.
Well, and I'll tell you, Ambreen, ever since, we had that first group of Afghans come in, I guess it must be 3 years ago now. I have been in communication with the county council, including Council Member Glass, saying, at least the least you can do is have a website where all of the people who are participating in these activities, so people know what each other are doing. There's people who want to volunteer, who want to give food, who want to provide housing, et cetera, et cetera. And there was no place where all of this could be, to come together. And it still hasn't been done. It's still piecemeal. Like, there's different organizations that are doing things. And Kate has a meeting of sort of the immigrant task force community or refugee task force committee. But the county does not. One of the things that I asked for is that, some funds or something should be diverted so that the county has a centralized place where we could do this. And that was just for refugees, because we had a huge influx of refugees coming in, and they did not do that. So imagine what you're asking for is even there's no coordination happening.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that from being on a part of for the last couple of years, the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington, where they put together, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, there was a rapid response network. There was also a directory of social services for crisis that was put out annually, and it was something that began under the leadership of Clark Lobenstein, who's the founder of the conference almost two decades ago, one of the things that came up in the last couple of years as challenges, we were listening to staff that were dedicated to doing this, Ilhan, was the tremendous capacity challenges of individual community groups that are often volunteer led. So I think part of like in assessing like what kind of support would be needed and thinking about, is it the role of the county council, or is this an NGO task that could be potentially grant supported by the council? That would be a clearinghouse that isn't necessarily advocating or taking advocacy positions, but literally playing that role of demonstrating that this very diverse community has an infrastructure that's still very nascent. So I think the observation of the absence of a clearinghouse is an important one for us to lift up. I think that thinking about the appropriate role of state and county government in facilitating communication and bringing awareness has to do not just with the actual physical, excuse me, if there's a directory or a website. The fundamental problem that I have learned over the years is that it's also dependency on having a volunteer tasked with, I am in an X group. When an event happens or a need percolates, it's socialized. We are going to post it to this particular platform, and that platform is then going to be marketed so that everybody is aware. There are lessons. We did a little bit of a series of conversations and a bit of a case study on how that directory was effective for organizations across faith and service groups. I can pull that up and share it, because I think embedded in that were specific recommendations based on our region. And several of those organizations are in Montgomery County.
2 comments on that. One, Bertha shared a link. If you click on that link, it actually shows you a county calendar of, I guess, everything that's happening. Somehow I had never seen this calendar, so I guess the word needs to get out. But to your point, one of the things that happened during COVID, and I can speak from the food task force perspective, was when we were doing a food distribution, there was a county page where I, as a Muslim, as an ICM food provider, could go in and put in my information. County was not endorsing it. It was just a place that we would go and put in information. This is the time it starts. This is the time it ends. Any other information, put the flyer, and it was there. And it's still there today on the Food Council page where people can go. They know which institutions are distributing food, and nonprofits had a way, non-county organizations had a way of putting their information in, saying, hey, I'm doing it such and such time. So for example, if somebody's holding an interfaith event next weekend, we would go and check there and say, oh, something is happening in September or October, or it's happening at this church or synagogue or mosque. So that's
I totally hear you, and I think that's great. But I think that one of the things that I was hearing is that there's been such a shift in the labor that's performed in these organizations and by different folks who are familiar with or unfamiliar with the existing networks. Like one of the things that I'm hearing is that, oh, well, I've designated an intern to gather and share information. And so they're communicating in the platforms that they're native to. And I just wonder if that platform that I just clicked on it, yeah, it's like an interactive calendar. I'm a resident. I didn't know that existed. And I'm a pretty informed and active resident on a lot of different fronts, as you guys are as well. So not to say that we are the baseline, I would suspect that we're actually incredibly engaged in paying attention to what's happening in the county. And if I am not familiar with this as a resource, I think we need to then look at and just discern what are the obstacles. And it could be that, and I'm happy to take the lead in putting together and pulling from some of the case studies that I've seen from previous evaluations of why is this particular network of information not getting to folks. And it could be as simple as having and creating, a more robust infrastructure for making sure that groups are updated and proactively reached out to on a regular schedule, and a lot of this comes down to the capacity of people and volunteers. Yes. That is my experience from having organized since I was in high school, it is the labor, often the unpaid labor, often of women, that are the backbone of a lot of the NGO faith-based organizations that do work around the country. And I don't think that that's, I don't think that the
And seniors.
and seniors, you're absolutely right, Ilhan. And seniors, people who have where you have more time, often to be able to give to community. So I'm happy to take a stab at putting together some recommendations on what are possible ways for us to think about increasing awareness, and just also spending more than 2 seconds looking at that. Like, how easy is it to use? What can I find on it? And also asking Bertha, perhaps if we could get some analytics from the webmaster on how many clicks per month is that website getting?
I can find out. I will say that, so, you know, we have the county council and we have the county executive. So where the calendar lives is over at the county executive side of things, but we can still facilitate getting those metrics. So I'll commit to getting that information.
I think, and let me be very clear, because this is also a public meeting. The reason I'm asking for the metrics is so we can better understand what exists, if it's being used, one, and how robust it is as a platform. Two, I have a question, Bertha, that perhaps you can help me answer in conversation with the county executive partner or colleague that is responsible for this website. How are updates communicated? Is this what appears in the county executive's monthly newsletter? How is this information and data that is gathered pushed out? So if you imagine the pulling of the information from the community groups, how is this information then pushed out? And what do those numbers look like? I think as we're thinking about recommendations, it would be very helpful to know in our county how the information that's currently out there is being used.
Yep.
And related to that, does the county executive do a submit your event prompt to all the groups that have applied for grants, to all the faith-based organizations that exist in the county, to all the community-based groups that are intersectional, that may touch the faith-based, racial, religious, orientation, all the various groups that we have as part of this initiative? Are those organizations prompted to share events that can go into this calendar?
I'll certainly find out. Those
Great, thank you.
Excellent questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I could just take a step back and say, just so I understand, how is this related to our purview? I just want us to articulate that, to say, how would this be related?
I can tell you how I think it's related, why I'm curious about it, Ilhan. I think that's an excellent question, the strategic question of like, why go down the rabbit hole of this particular question? I think listening to last week's meeting and listening even to some of the questions that we had in our breakout group, one of the pillars of experience that I heard articulated was that having interfaith events and activities that allow people to have contact either through social service or other mechanisms that aren't necessarily around a negative experience increase personal contact, and that contact theory diffuses misunderstanding and embrace of stereotypes and tropes. So if we hold contact theory as that platform, and then the second is that we say in a diffuse county with lots of people, it's not just centralized through one or two organizations or one or two mosques. We have an emergent, multifaceted series of NGOs, community-based groups that are interested and invested in communicating with the county executive. That's what I'm thinking. Like, there's an invested interest in communicating with civic leadership. So my feeling about the value of this is that that influence that the county executive and civic leaders have in being able to have an audience with that diverse, diffuse group creates an opportunity to be able to draw information and then increase or market awareness about that in a more strategic way, to increase awareness about the interfaith walk that's happening, or a community event, or to inspire somebody who says, hey, wait a minute, my event just happened. It's just in my little community or my neighborhood association, but it's a great event we just did. We want to bring awareness to it and share it beyond our district or our council. So that's the reason why I think I see the connection to better understanding how to utilize the communication vehicles of the county executive and the council members.
Sorry,
Did that?
Go ahead, Amreen.
No, I was just saying, Ilhan, did that sort of answer the question?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It was excellent. Thank you. That was exactly what I needed. I think, it's always good to take a step back and say, okay, we are moving in this direction. How is it part of our purview? And what purpose does it serve, for whatever it is that we're trying to achieve? So that was perfect for me. Thank you.
I think can I add one thing that after listening to your meeting, the meeting that I wasn't able to be a part of last week, one thing that came up for me, I watched the YouTube video of the conversation, and then I had a couple conversations with young people, particularly my son, who's my focus group of a high schooler. And I asked about the reporting. So we're talking about the calendar here. I want to shift to kind of bystander, the whole idea around bystander and reporting and underreporting. And one of the things that I heard over and over again from him and a couple of his friends who I happened to be driving to a movie, when I brought the uncomfortable question up, I had my own little private focus group of 16 and 17-year-old boys, was, what is it that does this happen in the schools? Have you seen it? And why is it not being reported? And where, if it was to be reported, where would you want to report it? And what I heard was actually, from the perspective of a young person, really instructive for me. And I thought that one was the perception that the reporting process doesn't produce any sort of actual consequence, that there's no value other than potentially being stigmatized for
Being
telling on someone.
Yeah.
And so I think consequence is one thing that we have to really think about, because I was thinking about it in the Montgomery County Public School. I had the benefit of having that Damon's presentation in the back of my mind as I was talking to the young men. And the second issue that came up, in addition to consequence, was the idea that it's not coming from kids. Like, it's not ours. It's not something that we own as young people. Like, we're not engaged in it. And an example that one of them gave me was like, when the Me Too conversations were starting to percolate in the high school and filtering in, young people were creating mechanisms for sharing and challenging bad actors using social media. Now, I'm not suggesting we look for the same thing, but what I found really interesting was this idea that instead of the grown-ups, the adults telling us how to do something, which, by the way, they're not doing, they're not availing themselves of the reporting mechanisms that exist. If it were to be, if there could be some sort of way of convening one of those kind of like hackathons in which young people are engaged to come up with ways that meet their particular perspective on how they would like to raise awareness about a particular action, and what would the constraints be for them? Like, how critical is it that information have an opportunity for them to conceal their identity, or only make their identity available to particular people, as opposed to being on a public record, which came up. And it brought to mind something that I remember the Sick Coalition doing about 10 years ago, where they gathered young people who were encountering a lot of bullying in the schools, and they gathered young people to listen to them, and created from that a very organic reporting mechanism that would then meet the needs of what young people, and it had their trust. They believed in it. And so I listened to a lot of our concerns in the last meeting about underreporting, and then listening to why not report. And I don't think any of it is, when we hear it, at least for me, it wasn't shocking or surprising at all. And so I think about, when in terms of recommendations, one of the recommendations that I think we ought to consider is engaging. And I think Sammy Saeed at the SMOB member would be somebody to engage in conversation about this. I started at another event. I'd had 2 conversations with him about something related, but I think he and the other SMOB member would be ideal partners for engaging and thinking about how to facilitate and potentially come up with a more innovative way to get young people to reclaim on their own terms the culture that and the civic culture that they want to live in. Because to your question, Ilhan, the strategic question of why, when young people and bystanders believe that their values are being challenged, they're more likely to stand up to it in their own terms. Like that was something that really struck me in some of the research that has been done on bystander and upstander behavior.
So I have a question about that. And that is, do we want to address at all the fact that some of the parents, I don't know if it's the majority of the parents, but at least a good portion of the parents come from backgrounds that are not familiar with, taking up problems with teachers, of complaining to schools, of telling their kids that you need to stand up for yourself. And when they finally do get themselves to the point where they do feel they can complain, it's in a very aggressive, it's like they don't do it in this very, dispassionate way. They kind of build it up, and finally they get to a point where it's explosive, rather than dealing with it and, through proper channels where you can be, more, I guess, the word is dispassionate about how you move forward with this. Do we want to talk about that at all? Is that useful at all in addressing?
I think that's the cultural competency. I think that comes into the cultural competency question of the mechanisms for reporting have to take in the cultures that we are asking to engage and trust a reporting mechanism. Right. When I was the PTA president in our elementary school, one of the things that we kept inviting parents. Okay, we kept inviting parents to come into the school to volunteer. We had a significant number of families and parents that were undocumented. And there was a real fear about coming in and being asked for an ID and being entered into a system that could make them or their family members vulnerable. I learned that actually by going to the community center, going to the community areas that they gathered and listened with tea and coffee. Literally, it was just like, let me listen in here. I want to invite you to come do this. What's stopping you? And so I think similarly, it's not the same, obviously, but Ilhan, what you're describing also resonates with my own memory growing up in the country of don't create waves, like don't question authority, respect the teacher. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to get an education and to graduate and go. Like, I remember those messages, and it may not be the messages that second generation and third generation kids, because we have those in Montgomery County, are hearing, but it most certainly, I suspect, could be part of a narrative that continues in families that are encountering a whole host of obstacles to living, in which that those concerns manifest. So I think cultural competency and like, what are the cultural barriers that we have to take into consideration when developing a reporting system and improving reporting. And my experience is that to do that effectively, we need to have those community members that are most familiar be the voices that we listen to on this.
And if I could just add on to that.
Exists in our community.
Go ahead.
I said that will always exist in our community. That's one of the dilemmas we face in the Muslim community, especially when it comes to parents. They don't have the voice. They don't want to express themselves. It's just, do what we're supposed to do.
Well, and part of that, Brother Faisal, is that they don't even know where to begin. It's like, where do I even begin? And they'll start calling their senator or something when they should be starting somewhere else. So that's on us sometimes to
but
our own. people. Yeah. go
Ilhan,
ahead.
you just Ilhan, that point you just made, and the idea of not having a voice. You know, right after 9/11, I did a whole host of these know your rights seminars that we did, and a lot of it was in response to hate crimes. We did a Stop the Hate workshop. We had a video, then we had workshops, and I felt like a lot of the change happened when we had those workshops that were not didactic of it, somebody standing at the front lecturing, but we threw up scenarios and then with the group together walk through, what do you do? And it became a really interactive experience. But I wonder if widening the lens from just, you know, responding to a particular hate crime, if it's like civic engage, like how do I get involved and raise concerns as a parent, and specifically in the public schools, because so much of what we saw in the data that was presented at our first meeting, so much of this is manifesting on the playgrounds and in the public schools.
So I'm going to interrupt really quickly. Sorry, Ilhan, and just do a time check. So we're 7:38. And I wanted to make sure that we have our next steps kind of figured out. Are we still doing the listening session next week? Are we ready for that one? Because that's what we have picked.
Do we have a flyer for that? Do we have
No, I don't have a flyer yet. I can work on something and send it via WhatsApp. But are we ready to do a listening session? Because one of the things that we wanted to do at the list, one of the things that we need to do as part of the task force is come up with 5 recommendations. So we were thinking, let's put down 10 things, and then we can narrow them down based on community feedback, and all of us might be thinking the same thing. So kind of condense them into a shorter. That's why I threw up this slide with a couple of points that I started kind of jotting down based on the meeting that we had last time. With, okay, these are two areas, and then we can kind of elaborate. But when we are doing the listening sessions, we can kind of share with them as well, this is what we're thinking, and then see how people feel. Or we could just do a listening session and have people share whatever they like.
I think we should revisit, since we haven't started advertising for it, and that's 7 days from now. I'm concerned that we're not gonna, that doesn't give people enough time. And I'm wondering if we need to push the listening session to like the Tuesday after Labor Day, or the Friday before. Well, no, people go away for Friday of Labor Day, and that's the first Friday of school being back in session. So school's back in session on the 28th. I mean, if we were to, and that's a really busy time for parents because you're just inundated with everything that you have to fill out. So we have to present on the 19th. If we go back to, if we need at least 7 days before the presentation to use the listening session as a vehicle for being able to kind of get to a place for the presentation on the 19th, which is an initial presentation from our cohort, of course. I wonder if we could do like the after Labor Day in that second week, if that would be better. I'm just concerned that the 21st, we haven't marketed it. We haven't put the word out at all. So
you're thinking 11th?
I mean, that's my concern is we haven't given it, we haven't advertised it enough. So I would like to advertise it a little bit more.
Advertising, if we want to be ready for the people with some ideas, then we need to have something that we've thought through, and we haven't had enough time to do that yet.
Okay, so those are 2 reasons then to like, what I'm hearing is multiple reasons for rescheduling this. Okay, so Berta, if you could help with identifying, I'm mindful of the staffing resources also. Are there other cohort meeting events happening during that second week of September?
Let me check on that, and I'm able to see it. I will also add that all the cohorts are meeting. So last week they met and they did establish some dates for their cohorts to meet. As far as listening conversations, there have not been any scheduled yet, but that doesn't mean that during their next meeting they'll start putting something on the calendar. But as far as, let me see what we have already confirmed. the second week or after Labor Day. September, there's really nothing yet.
Okay,
You know,
So
Why isn't the first week, I mean, why don't you want to do the first week of September?
my concern about the first week of September is, as a parent, the first week of school back, you're getting just, it's a lot of
much.
transition. It's too
Okay.
much. You're getting
yes. And you're
homework
coming back
folders.
from, Labor Day as well.
You're coming back from Labor Day, you're getting a lot of information, and it's also just trying to get the house. I mean, maybe I'm making an assumption based on my my own, whenever we did PTA related events, the first week of September was always a very difficult time to get people to dial in. And that was in a very discrete neighborhood community.
So then we get September 11th is on Monday. So we
Right.
could think about doing it the 12th or the 13th, which is Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right. We could
Every-
also do it September 11th. I mean, we could also have that conversation on September 11th in the evening. It's a Monday. Do we
Well,
think
yeah, but
that
I'm
that's,
wondering if anybody, because there's usually other activities. They might have activities in the school or whatever, because it is September 11th.
So we don't need to decide if we're pushing it off from next week. We don't have to decide that date right now. We can decide it via chat or during a next
Okay.
meeting. So
Right.
Bertha, on the website, could you just change next week, the 21st to just a regular meeting, and perfect.
I'll
Thank
do
Okay.
that.
okay.
In terms of just ideas on what we want to give as recommendations, I'll send this in the WhatsApp or via an email as well. These were just starting points. But I would really like other people to kind of chime in, because you guys have
Yeah.
more ideas as well in terms of what our recommendations were.
Yeah.
One of
Is
the
this-
things that I
this is
wanted
a
to
work- Can you put this on a Google Doc so we can all work on it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that-
One of the things that I think outreach and education, we talked about this in the last meeting as well. One of the things that I really wanted to mention here regarding community outreach and relationship building is we have people that are in these spaces, like our cohorts and different people that are in the interfaith spaces, right? So some of these events are not really for those people. It's not for us, because we're already trying to work on these areas. It's kind of grabbing other people as well. So one of the things I saw AIM Action in Montgomery do was, when they're having their listening sessions, every person of every congregation makes a commitment. I will bring 5 people. I will bring 10 people, right? So you're bringing other people, either from your congregation or from your racial background, whatever that community is, you're trying to bring more people. And that kind of creates that awareness, right? It's not just the hate task force people or the county people going from interfaith event to interfaith event. It's also trying to make and influence your community and kind of saying, okay, come with me. This mosque, for example, will
Yeah,
bring 10
you want to
people
get,
or whatever.
you want to get behind, but you want to get beyond the choir.
Yes.
Okay. I totally agree with that. And I assume you're meaning that in the context of our listening session.
I'm actually putting this in the context of whether it's the community hate violence committee, right? They're long-term, they're doing these. And then Kate also has a delegation of people that are interfaith as well, right? So I'm
Right.
talking about those people that are
Yeah.
already committed to a year term to kind of say, hey, you need to be
See-
working on these all year round.
So I'm just thinking of, trying to hear you in terms of like the action item. And what I'm hearing you say is that it needs to be an explicit priority, that the liaisons and the delegates and the coordinators that are named and part of a committee that connects to the county is also responsible for bringing members beyond those who are engaged in quote unquote interfaith work or interfaith activities. Okay, I'm sorry. I was just trying to hear like, where's the recommendation in there? And so that's what I just, okay, great.
Thank you for verbalizing it. Very nice.
Absolutely, absolutely happy to do that. And I apologize for interrupting you. I had a moment to go through a couple days ago research on contact theory. Post 9/11 20th anniversary, we did a big show on lessons learned after, you know, the spike in polarization and hate crimes against anyone perceived as being Muslim, not just Muslim. And one of the things that always leapt out at me was how significant it is for civic leaders to stand up quickly, often, and frequently in multiple modalities to express how the behavior, the hateful behavior stands outside the values of the community. That civic leadership role played a significant role in shifting and shaping attitudes about represented minority groups that the average citizen in a community, you know, wouldn't know personally. So in other words, I may not know anyone in my community who's Muslim, but I'm hearing, for example, County Executive Mark Elrich speak regularly and frequently anytime something happens, small or big, denouncing it as a crime that or an incident that violates the core values of what holds our community together. And the question I have for you, Bertha, and for the council is for your communications team. When a crime, a hate crime, or an incident happens in Montgomery County or in Montgomery County public schools, that information is not often denounced as quickly and as loudly as I have seen in other communities. And the reason I'm asking what the protocol and process is because after 9/11, there was an intense effort to convene meetings, gather, to go on television, to host events. I was a part of a lot of them. I remember them. As time has changed and as different challenges have changed and as crimes against different communities have percolated, and I think of anti-Semitism right now, one of the things that I've noticed is that with the spike in anti-Semitism, which is deeply disturbing, there has been, and I think a more rigorous repudiation of even the smallest acts, graffiti in a bathroom in a public school. You're not just hearing Monifa McKnight talk about it at Montgomery County Public Schools. You're hearing council members, you're hearing business leaders, you're hearing the Chamber of Commerce. We have a hub of civic leaders that have this platform to set the tone of what is acceptable. And our kids are also listening to that. So are their parents. It's coming into the households. I am curious if you can find out, is there an explicit protocol for communicating? What does that communication look like? What are the modes in which that communication is distributed? Is it social media? Is it sending a press release to WAMU, WTOP, WJLA, WCBS? Who's getting it? And is there any sort of feedback that the county communications team has that would offer insight into how effective that is? That is something, and have council members kind of gathered feedback either from social media, emails, letters from constituents that offer an indication if those messages are getting out? Because contact theory in a community in which you may know that you have a lot of Muslim neighbors, but you don't know a Muslim. You know you have a lot of Muslim neighbors. You see them walking to prayers, or during Ramadan, you see them walking to various communities together as a group, or Eid is happening and the police have stopped the traffic on your road and you know that's what's happening, but you may not personally know someone. So how is it that we are, the civic leaders in our community, are humanizing and speaking out when something happens? Is there a protocol that is applied to all hate crimes that are on our radar?
And Bertha, I just want to make it clear, but Umbreen, I'm going to just add on to what you're saying. I know that the county executive and the county council puts up things for Eid and for Ramadan, and that there's a Ramadan dinner. That's not what she's talking about. She's talking about the same kind of reaction to, a hate crime against Muslims, graffiti, whatever, that we get in the Jewish community, where, you get an immediate reaction and, this kind of ad campaign that this is not tolerated, this is not part of our values. And it doesn't seem to be happening as much, or to the same extent for hate crimes against other groups. And, you know, we want to know what the protocol is and why it's so quick in one area when it happens to one group of people, but seems to be less quick when it happens to other groups of people.
Yeah, and I just to iterate, I don't know that I don't have any data to show that it is more or less. And what I'm asking is that as we develop, because my perception of what I'm seeing is not reinforced by the actual data of like what are folks doing. But I know that in the communications office, somebody must be tracking every time a release is put out, every time a press conference is held, every time an Instagram live is done. And producers are called. I mean, these are earned media opportunities to convey the civic values and the outrage that we heard around the table when we first gathered at our meeting. And I think that we have such a diverse county and so many different challenges when you look at that hate crime roster that was just so startling to read that the police department shared and circulated and the schools presented at our first meeting. I think it's really important for us as a community to understand what is the protocol from the most low-level incidents to the most egregious, and who are the voices that we're hearing from. That I think that is something, and how frequent that data, that information would just be super helpful in being able to think about what kind of actionable recommendations we can make on behalf of our community to our elected leaders.
That's all you're asking for, equal representation.
Well, and what Umbreen is asking for is really to start with, what is the protocol?
What's the process? What lifts up when there's an anti-Black or an anti immigrant event that happens that is directed towards someone who's undocumented. What is the reaction, the public reaction from civic leaders? And I'm talking about elected leaders. And then the related question, Bertha, is there an informal network? Like, I know that we have so many fabulous civic organizations, and I'm thinking of the Chamber of Commerce, I'm thinking of the community resource centers, the Interfaith Works folks. Like, we are so blessed to have such a rich network of civic organizations. Is there a communication mechanism, a rapid response communication network system for our county leadership when they get an incident, whether it's from the schools or the police department, to be able to activate our civic leaders and say, we need to step up, we need to say something, we need 3 business leaders to join a county council member and a faith leader, and it's going to happen, and it's going to be newsworthy because it's happening. So that members of the community who may not be connected or touched by that violence are learning about it, and they're feeling it, and they hear, hey, this is not the county I want to be a part of. And maybe they take that conversation home and talk to their kids about it, or talk to their neighbors about it. But the contact theory that Ilhan, I know you were shaking your head about, like everything that we learned, the attitudes that have shifted around one of the smallest minority groups, the Sikh American community and the Muslim American community in 20 years after 9/11, the lessons learned is that active, frequent civic engagement and speaking out against events that aren't celebratory necessarily, but reacting to violations of values.
Understood. I'll get you all of that information and I'll share it with you all.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we have 4 minutes left. Is there homework that we're assigning ourselves for before next meeting?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I don't know if we've said this in our meetings, but I think this idea of microaggressions is also really important. I mean, I think our kids suffer, a lot of people suffer from these microaggressions, and I think that they ought to be included in the whole hate crime thing, so microaggressions sort of add up and they allow people to behave in a particular way, and then that sort of pushes the boundary a little bit and allows people to behave in a much more negative way. And I think at some point we should take that up and see what our community thinks about, or what they experience in terms of microaggressions. I don't know how you guys feel about that. That was a suggestion.
I appreciate you raising it. I think microaggressions are really complicated to kind of dive into, because there are so many different ways that people interpret what that means. And what my only reaction to that is, I would want to be really, really mindful about our definitions and what constitutes it versus, and what that constitution of a microaggression translates into in terms of interpersonal human behavior, in terms of how that empowers or disempowers someone to speak to that moment. Like I've seen in a lot of DEI trainings how talking about microaggressions in a manner that invite people in to learn about what they mean can be really powerful and productive. I've seen microaggressions used as a way to foster a sense of being empowered to accuse another person of having a whole host of intent that they may not be totally aware their action was creating or producing. And instead of inviting in conversation for both, it's led to deeper divides.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Both sides are correct. I was a victim of microaggressions as I was growing up in the school system. And it was on the part of teachers, and it was just plain meanness is what it was. And it happened because I was an immigrant and Muslim and not European and whatever. So, it was not misunderstood where people say things unwittingly and, just don't realize how the other person's going to take it. So, but I do appreciate what you said, and I think, so the question to us that I think would be are we going to just avoid microaggressions, or are we going to talk about it and sort of flesh it out a bit, or bring out some of the nuances?
I added it to the list of items,
Yeah.
so we can flesh it out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can discuss all of these and kind of say
Yeah.
which ones are the top 5.
Okay.
And I think microaggressions is something we should bring up in a constructive way in a listening session, because I think, Ilhan, like I completely, I'm sorry that you had that experience. It resonates for me. Like it won't use this meeting as the opportunity to share it, but I think that creating a way for people to be able to recognize what it is. And again, I think about how the conversation's set up, like how do we flesh it out to create a way to talk about what those experiences look like in the different spheres of life that we live and run in Montgomery County. I think the last question that I had noted down from listening to the last week's session that I wasn't able to be a part of was allocation of resources for faith-based groups that are dealing with hate by focusing on security. And so, Bertha, I wanted to ask you a question. Can we get an update on there was a series of grants that were made around increasing house of worship security that was supported by federal funds and matched by some state funds, I believe. And I wanted to better understand the grant recipients, like which organizations received that, and how if there's details about what the grant, is it just security cameras, or is it a training? Is it a community awareness building? Is it upstander training? Like that creating a secure environment is also something that can be an umbrella for building programming that is needed to address some of the things that we've raised over the last couple of weeks. So if we could better understand the choices that have been made with those dollars that have been allocated through grants, that would be super helpful.
I will add that to my list of follow-ups. Yes.
Thank you, Bertha.
And Adela, I will add this when you make that list into a Google Doc. One of the things that I did want to add about community sort of participation is, a lot of those things were interfaith, but I think we missed out on community activism, civic engagement, those kinds of things are really, really important too. And this idea of contact, that's how you get contact. It's, you know, you're not just sticking to your faith organizations, but you're getting a voice by understanding how you can actually help people actually create a voice for themselves, how they actually impact laws, how they actually impact, you know, policy by being a part of these community and civic organizations.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Mine was just more of a conversation starter. Bertha, one quick question. August 29th was supposed to be the next task force meeting. Is that still the case? When we have our full task force meet?
Let me see. Yes,
Yes.
that is when,
The Jewish cohort presents, right?
that's
That
right.
date is not on the website though.
Let me, okay, just give me one moment. I don't think it is the,
I was wondering if something.
yeah, it should have been there.
Okay,
I'll
so that's still the case.
corrected. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
thank you.
And I have one last question, Bertha. I know that the Montgomery County Public Schools does a climate audit, you know, a behavior, a climate audit of like polarization and bullying. It came out of, I believe it was sparked out of the efforts to kind of combat bullying. Does the county have anything like that equivalent to auditing attitudes within Montgomery County? Like, is there any sort of mechanism for gauging the climate in Montgomery County that isn't necessarily a story that's driven by the negative events and incidents that we see? But I am curious if there's a climate benchmark.
I
Mhm.
I will have to look into that. I think
Okay.
there might be an annual thing that the county does, but I'm not sure. So let
Mhm.
me look into it as well.
I've
Yeah.
seen the surveys as a parent, and MCPS has done those, but I haven't.
Right.
And that's just
That, well, that's exactly right. I'm remembering the MCPS one, and I had a question about Montgomery County because we're talking, we want schools, but also like the others. And I'm thinking about it in the context of the message and about the engagement and perceptions of residents that get beyond the gatekeepers, Ilhan, that you're talking about, or the designated, you know, community leaders who know each other that become a cohort in of themselves, but they're not necessarily representative of everybody. And so I'm just curious if there is a climate benchmark or a climate survey that's done in Montgomery County, especially with so many demographic changes and also the arrival of so many newcomers, because we are a welcoming state for a host of communities that are under attack.
And Breen, talking about those, we, you know, the new, we received a lot of recent immigrants who are not familiar with just how to navigate, the fact that they do have a voice, the fact that they have spokespeople. They're barely finding the mosques they're going into, and you know, they're trying to get their feet on the ground. I mean, they have very low paying jobs, although their kids are doing pretty well in schools. But I think that we should think about, you know, being an advocate for them until they can advocate for themselves, or their children can advocate for themselves. So that might be
or for the county to do a for the county to do a convening. I mean, is there somebody that has a role similar to Kate's role that is specifically for creating a mechanism of networking all the various entities and resources that's accountable, you know, on a regular basis, and tracking it, as opposed to falling on the shoulders of volunteers who are working on behalf of different groups. And you've done an amazing job, Ilhan, in flagging those issues. And I'm remembering the first time you and I hopped on a call to talk about some of the instances that young kids were facing. It's really painful. And we've heard from teachers and from lots of administrators. And I think that the numbers, I was just looking at the numbers that Maryland is accepting, and the staffing up of the resettlement agency offices in Silver Spring are a real indicator that we need to get ahead of this and address like the gaps, so that we are doing our best to be a model of integration and welcoming.
I posted in the chat, and I'm sorry, I'm going back to the survey question. So I posted on the chat something that I found for a 2019 survey that the county conducted, but I'll certainly look into that more specifically and see if there's an updated one or
Okay. Okay. This is done in coordination. The NORC survey, I believe, is done in coordination with or in prep around the census. I think that's what the National Community Survey is.
This might be that time frame.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think that because I get a lot of these reports. I think I can't look at it in close detail on the screen. I need my glasses. My ability to read without my readers is very limited.
Costco is your best friend.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate, Bertha, you sending that, and I'll take a closer look. That looks like 2019. Adila, I think I interrupted you when you were in the midst of wrapping us up. Is there any other housekeeping items that you feel like we need to address? We've touched on quite a few. I feel like this has been a really productive meeting.
I just wanted to give a chance to Imam Faisal to, if there's something that you
I'm going
want
to
share.
I have to excuse myself because they waited on me to lead the Salat. No, Maghrib time. So I have to leave right now.
Okay.
No,
So
We're
sorry about
wrapping up.
that. Yeah, but I'm going to send my recommendations to every one of you always before the next meeting, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Salam.
Adla, when's our next meeting? Our cohort meeting? Do we have one scheduled?
Next
The
Monday.
21st.
Next Monday. Okay.
So 1 week from today.
Instead of the
So-
listening session, we're just going to be in a regular meeting.
So, Adila, can I ask you, so you're going to turn this document into a Google Doc?
Yeah.
And then can we in our chat then assign tasks and just have some very clear like expectations of what we need to do so that we're coming in to the Monday
Yes.
meeting as prep?
Absolutely.
And I guess as soon as we can get a flyer for the listening session, I'd love it, because I've mentioned to people that I've talked to parents at different environments and friends who who didn't know about this, who I'm trying my best to, like, anytime I see someone, like, hey, this is happening.
Yeah.
What do you think? But I want to be more deliberate about it. And I also want to raise awareness. And Bertha, this is my question for you. Can we do a little earn media, a little public media around this? Like, could I pitch this to a local talk show on a radio station and that may have listeners who, like, if you're part of the Muslim community and you want to participate, we want to hear from you. Join us, kind of like a Kojo in your town. I'm wondering if we have a further date, I'd love to get the word out. So if you're not connected to a mosque, which most of the Muslim community is not connected to a mosque, we're an unmosqued community. So I want to think about other community mechanisms for getting the word out.
Yeah, and we're also going to do a press release included in our different newsletters, social media around the different community conversations too. So, yep.
Awesome.
David, did you have any questions for us before we close? No. Okay.
And David, I'm sorry, is David with one of the council members? I apologize. I didn't hear your title.
Yeah, so I'm Deputy Chief of Staff to the Council President. So normally our Chief of Staff, Valeria, she attends kind of like the full anti-hate task force meetings as well as the cohort ones. She is taking some R&R for the council recess, so I'm filling in on her behalf tonight. And I think later this week, the Latino cohort is going to be meeting as well, so I'll be planning on tuning into that meeting as well.
Great.
I really enjoyed listening to you guys tonight and the conversation. I was taking some notes too.
Great.
Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for
You're
joining.
welcome.
Do other people attend each other's cohort meetings? Or is anybody doing that?
I actually attended the African American cohort, but then I had a conflict, so I had to leave early. But yes, I am trying to attend where I can, because a lot of Muslims might be in jeopardy with that.
Yeah, our African and African American.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. African and African American.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's why I had shared that wherever people can, it is helpful to kind of listen. Hey, it's going to be common.
I think that was one of the points that came up at the first meeting, that it particularly we Muslim Americans are the most religiously diverse from racial, ethnic perspective in the country. So I think that that's a great idea. I'll take a closer look at Dia now that I'm back. and I can focus more on, I'm catching up and getting my head back in now that mom is doing better. Alhamdulillah. So I am, I'll look at that, because if we could, I think it's a great idea if we could participate. I know that we have there's actually a growing Latino Muslim community, very much so. Like just read a book about it. It's happening everywhere. Like it's pretty phenomenal, like how fast and large the communities are growing. And
Well, and the other thing is that we call people, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ambreen, but we're calling people African American, whereas, you know, America is actually divided between white and non-white. So, you know, I mean, when a Muslim marries a Christian American or whatever, they say he married a white girl or she married a white guy. It's because we know very well that racism in this country is not about people from Africa. It's about Europeans and non-Europeans, right? So that's the racism line cuts there. And it's not just about, you know, being Black, and anybody who's of different colors experiences that. So I think somehow we need to come to terms with that's where the true racism in this country is.
The serial question that I think every community is wrestling with is that reckoning, the racialized nature of the country in all spheres. Couldn't agree with you more.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bertha, for recording the session and for all your helpful messages. And inshallah, we will meet next Monday, and we will talk on WhatsApp going forward.
And I'll send you a calendar invitation for Monday with the Zoom link to register, and make sure that everything's posted on our website as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Have a good
You too.
evening, everybody.